back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to do a series review, and this is another series which jumped straight onto one of my favourites lists. It's a series I really didn't expect to, well, I just didn't have any expectations actually, because I had not really heard anyone talk about this, and I just kind of stumbled across it on Twitter, I think. I saw the cover and I thought, that looks cool, that looks like epic fantasy. I'd heard the author's name before because I'm pretty sure he's written other books as well, although I hadn't read any of them. So I was like, let's give it a try. And I'm so glad that I did. It's really great when a book that you've not really heard anything about just kind of catches your attention, you read it and it's great. So that's what happened with this series, and I loved the whole series. So it starts off with the Black Coast. I didn't really know anything about it, as I say. I just kind of went into it without expectations, and it turned out to be a real culture clash, which is immediately something I really enjoy in fantasy. I really enjoy seeing two cultures clash with one another and then kind of have to learn, grow, develop to understand one another, or not, if the case may be, and to end up at war. So I really like that as a concept where two cultures kind of have to come together and grow and learn, and that's very much what this is. It's got fantastic LGBTQ plus representation. It's actually a very key theme, especially in book 1 and 2, that really focuses a lot of the culture clash, because there is quite a discrepancy between two cultures about LGBT plus situations. So I really like that as a theme. I also really like later on in the series that we get examples of cultures where pronoun use very different to our own. We have lots of different pronouns. I think there's about 7, 8, maybe more in that one culture, and they kind of use different pronouns depending on who they are, what they want to be known as. Quite often people will change pronouns in certain situations. You kind of have to go with a formal pronoun if you don't understand who someone is yet, if they haven't introduced themselves. So there's a lot of pronoun rules, but I really liked that that was just a culture in this world, like it's just how it is. So the LGBT themes and the pronouns were great. I loved those, but I didn't expect them. It was just a nice surprise to see that in a book about fantasy. And the book is great in its own right without those things in there at all. The book follows this culture called the Jikoshi, who are going to a new place to try and settle. Now, the Jikoshi have been this kind of raiding group who for years and years have gone along to the Black Coast, and they've raided there, they've terrified the women and children and stolen them away and abused them, and they've stolen from the land, and just generally not very favourably looked upon by the inhabitants of the Black Coast, because they have always been raided by the Jikoshi. Now we're following a particular small part of the Jikoshi who are going to the Black Coast in order to try and settle there, which is obviously unheard of. They're doing this because the new leader of their tribe, group, whatever you want to call them, is horrible and is kind of a psychotic person who seems to have like crazy powers of magic and is really terrifying. So they don't believe in the goals of this person, if you want to call them that. They don't believe in the goals of this leader, and they want to get away. So they are trying to do so by settling on the Black Coast, and they are invading the home of the Neridians who live on the Black Coast. And the idea is that they will try and coexist with the Neridians when they get there. Of course, it's not as easy as that, and there are lots of hiccups along the way which the tribe leaders or chieftains kind of have to overcome. There are various schisms between the two groups. There are lots of fractious moments where they have to kind of moderate the people in their groups, and they have to try and work together. The immediate moment that they meet is obviously quite fractious, and then as time goes on and they're trying to settle, it's really a constant struggle to kind of control their two groups of people who really for a long time have been at war with each other and never would have thought they could have coexisted. A lot of the time I feel like in fantasy books, leaders or people in charge kind of make poor decisions for drama, and it's not necessarily something the character would have done. But I feel like any poor decisions that they made in this book, they then had to learn from. The author made the characters learn from those things and kind of see the consequences of their actions a little more than I've seen in other fantasy series. And I really appreciated that kind of realism to it. It just gives a grounding to the characters. It made them feel more realistic. It made them feel genuine. It made them feel as though the author had really thought about these characters and what would they actually be like in a situation that is so foreign to their everyday lives. So our two main characters in book one, we have the son of a Thane who is called Damon, and he is the Neridian kind of viewpoint. And then we also have Sana, who is the chief of the Jikoshi people, and she is here with her tribe and along with also her daughter who is called Zana, and we see a little bit of her as well. So we're seeing kind of their viewpoints, and it's really nice to have viewpoints from both sides of the drama, because not only do they have to work together to kind of embrace one another's culture, but they also have their own struggles internally that we get to see with embracing one another's culture. And I really, really liked that clash and that kind of internal struggle that we got to see. The Neridians actually have dragons on their land, and they work with the dragons, or they use the dragons, especially in battle, but for various other tasks as well. Whereas the Jikoshi people are known for living on the sea. Traditionally, they live on the sea and they raid places. They are raiders, kind of like pirates, I suppose, but they are moving onto land, and they are moving onto a strange land with the Neridians. The story has quite a lot of drama moments where things just go wrong and schisms are brought up, but I really enjoyed the differences between their gods, their beliefs, their day-to-day lives, and the way that they had to navigate through those kind of complex issues with one another. We also had sort of a very small snippet into another plotline, which is about a thief, and it's her plotline. She's in this culture which has the different pronouns. It's her plotline in this other part of the world. Now, I will say in book one, this is a real sideline thing, and it was kind of a bit odd for me to keep switching to this viewpoint that really didn't seem to have a lot of relevance, so I wasn't sure where it was going. It does come into play a lot later on in the series, but in book one I was a little bit like, what is this about? It sounds cool, but where's it going? And I wasn't sure how it was going to tie in. So I will say that was a little bit sidelined in book one, but it does grow as the series goes. We also have a viewpoint from the reborn kings, and there's like rumours that this king has been reborn. There's also rumours that the rulers who are currently ruling are going to maybe be overthrown. There's a lot of rumours going on basically, and a lot of political strife or changeover happening in the kingdom. That's quite far away from the Black Coast where most of this book takes place, but it is something that's going on in the background. And again, book number two specifically really starts to deal with the political side a little bit more, because we get other viewpoint characters as we go through this series. It changes around. We still have viewpoints from Damon and Sana as we go through, but we also get viewpoints from Zana, who is Sana's daughter, and from other characters as well who we haven't sort of had any viewpoint from in book number one. We then see them in 2 and 3 as well, which I really, really liked. So book number one in this series, I actually was so surprised how much I loved it. I engulfed it really quickly, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. The only tiny weeny niggle I had is that the way they speak is quite annoying in the Neridian tongue. So they'll say things like, Sman hopes he will be able to. Sman is definitely trying to do this thing, or Sman will do that thing. And I was like, oh, come on, stop talking about yourself in like third person. It was so irritating. But anyway, hey ho, that's a small thing. I do think the audiobook really helped me get over that, because the audio narrator was really good. So the second one I ended up giving 4 stars to, slightly less, but I still really enjoyed it. This one focuses a lot more on the Neridians and their next door neighbours, who have constantly kind of been fractious neighbours, I suppose. They've not quite gone to war, but they've been on the brink, I suppose. They've never been friends, let's put it that way. And then also on some of the mountain tribes and people who live up in the mountains that are usually friends and traders with the Neridians, and the lack of them kind of turning up. Something mysterious is going on up in the hills and they're not sure why, so they send a little scouting party to try and find out what is going on. And this scouting party is made up of Neridians and Jikoshi, so it's it's an interesting mix. There's also like wild dragons and such in the forests up there, so it's quite an adventure, and I really enjoyed that little scene where they're sort of sneaking off to try and find out what's happening. It's a slight side plot, but it does tie into the overall, and I really liked kind of seeing that more political side of things picking up. Daryl is one of the characters that we kind of get mention of in book 1, but he's really not a key player until book number 2. Book number 2, he goes off and he starts to become a real political player in the world. He is venturing to the capital, and there he is trying to get help for the people of his homeland and make sure that they are approved by the ruling powers, and he's kind of trying to do something different and change up his life. So I really liked his viewpoint. I thought he was great. We also have flashbacks to that other character that I mentioned before, the thief, who's called Jaya. Her plotline comes into it a lot more in this one, and you can see that there is some overlap between the 3 sort of different places, but it is quite tenuous and it's not an obvious link. You have to kind of pick up on how they're tied together. I think that this book suffered very slightly from being like the middle book. The first one just opens with a bang, and it was just super awesome the whole way through, and I just really enjoyed it. I think this one has more characters, and therefore the shift in focus from like the 2 main characters in book 1 to a wider cast in book 2 means that it doesn't feel quite as desperate to move you along, I guess. It doesn't feel as punchy, but I really enjoyed it still, and I definitely loved when I did get to go back to the characters I'd already kind of built a bond with, and I did by the end of the book enjoy all the plot lines. It was just, it took me a little while to warm up to some of the newer ones. The issues of LGBT are still very much prevalent in book 2, and I liked seeing the different levels of like class and privilege in the capital, where we have like tsars, thanes, kings, gods, all sorts of things going on. So it's cool to see those different levels in society. Finally, we had book number 3, and I really enjoyed this one. Again, it was a pretty punchy story, and I definitely feel like the plot threads, I was going to say come together, but they don't, and that's the interesting thing, is that not everything gets tied together in this series in the way that I expected. I really believed a lot of the characters who were side characters kind of being mentioned were gonna meet up with other characters, and a lot of them actually have very different plot lines to where I thought they were going to go, which I was very pleased about. I was surprised and I liked it, and I didn't expect it, so I think that's always good. This is a fairly satisfying ending, I would say. Sometimes you get to the end of series and you're not sure, you wish there was more. I feel like this satisfies quite a lot, but there is an open-ended couple of questions where you can kind of imagine what might come next. So I do wonder whether Mike Brooks will return to this world at some point, or maybe do a new fantasy series. I would love that. One of the things I really loved about his work particularly was the way the characters grow. I think I've mentioned this a few times, but they really do have to grow. They have to develop, they have to learn from one another, and they have to question their own biases and insecurities, and things that they just didn't even think of in their culture are challenged by meeting other cultures, and I really like that. I definitely plan to read more by this author, and I'd love to hear if you guys have read this story, or whether you plan to now that you've heard my review of it. And if you've got any other recommendations of his works, please let me know, or if you have anything that sounds similar to this series, please let me know, because I'm definitely keen to find more series and books like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye everyone.
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.